Ancient Greece gave us democracy, drama, and some of the dumbest ideas ever conceived by man. This video isn't about Olympic glory. It's about curing baldness with goat pee, voting people into exile, and wiping your butt with broken pottery. Welcome to the side of Greek history they definitely didn't teach in school. 1. Forget expensive skincare. The hottest beauty product in ancient Greece was a delightful substance called gloios, which was the sweat, olive oil, and dead skin cells scraped off the bodies of famous athletes. I am not making this up. After a big wrestling match, some guy's job was to take a metal scraper and literally harvest the gunk off a champion's body, bottle it up, and sell it to the public. Women would then buy this celebrity body sludge and smear it on their faces, believing it would make them beautiful. It's like if today, you could buy a jar of LeBron James post-game sweat. Imagine the marketing pitch. New from Olympus Cosmetics. It's essence of Milo of Croton. Get that fresh, I just wrestled a bull glow. It was the original celebrity wellness scam, proving that people have always been willing to pay a fortune for the most disgusting garbage, as long as it's endorsed by a famous person. 2. If you ever time travel to the ancient world, here's a pro tip. Never ever take a job at a laundromat. The secret ingredient for getting those togas pearly white wasn't bleach. It was massive quantities of human urine. They placed large pots on public street corners for anyone to make a contribution. It was your civic duty to pee in a public pot. Then, workers called fullers would collect this liquid gold, dump it in giant tubs with the dirty laundry, and stomp on it for hours with their bare feet. This was a legitimate, respected profession. Imagine trying to explain your job at a party. Oh, me? I'm a senior urine stomper at Togas R Us. And to top it all off, the government saw this booming pee industry and decided to tax it. Emperor Vespasian actually said, "Money doesn't stink," which is a bold claim when your income is derived from a citywide urinal. 3. The bathroom situation only gets more horrifying. In a communal Roman latrine, you'd be sitting inches away from your neighbor discussing politics while doing your business. When it came time to wipe, you wouldn't find a roll of Charmin. You'd find a basket of pessoi, smooth stones, or for the truly unlucky, shards of broken pottery. Just think about that for a second. You had to carefully select your rock, hoping you didn't pick the one that was secretly a jagged triangle. It was a high-stakes game of chance every single day. And for the ultra-wealthy, there was the xylospongium, a sea sponge on a stick. Sounds luxurious, right? Wrong. It was also communal. One sponge stick for the entire neighborhood. You'd use it, give it a quick swish in a bucket of salty water, and put it back for the next guy. It was the original sharing economy, but instead of an Uber, you're sharing fecal bacteria. 4. In today's world, having red hair is considered striking and beautiful. In ancient Greece, it was basically a flashing neon sign that said, "Future vampire here." There was a genuine mainstream belief that redheads were destined to rise from their graves after death as flesh-eating demons. This wasn't just a silly folk tale, it was a legitimate public concern. Imagine the social awkwardness. You're trying to date someone, and you have to have the talk. "Listen, I really like you, but my parents are a bit traditional, and well, the fact that your hair is the color of sunset fills them with a deep, existential dread about you becoming a creature of the night." It's the most specific and insane prejudice in history. You could be the kindest person in Athens, but if you were a ginger, people were already debating how big of a rock they'd need to put on your coffin. 5. The ancient Egyptians were building the pyramids, a wonder of architectural and mathematical genius. At the same time, their top-shelf medical advice for birth control was, and I quote, "Get some crocodile dung." Yes, their premier contraceptive involved taking literal crocodile poop, mixing it with fermented dough to make a paste, and using it as a pessary. Someone, somewhere, was the first person to pitch this idea. "All right, team, we need a way to stop procreation. I was down by the Nile, I saw a croc take a dump, and I had a eureka moment." This came from the same civilization that invented written language. They could master astronomy, but when it came to reproductive health, their best idea sounded like a rejected stunt from Jackass. It's a miracle any of us are here today. 6. Picture this. You're in a sword fight. You take a nasty cut to the arm. The physician rushes over, but he's not carrying a medical bag. He's just anxiously scanning the ceiling. Why? Because the ancient Greek equivalent of a sterile bandage was a fat, dusty clump of spider webs. He would literally scrape a web out of a corner, probably with the spider still in it, and just cram it into your bleeding wound. To be fair, there's some science to it. Spider silk has antiseptic properties and helps with clotting, but can you imagine being the patient? You're in agony, and your doctor is saying, "Don't move. I found a magnificent orb weaver's nest behind this pillar. The acoustics in this corner give the silk a wonderful purity." You're just lying there, hoping the spider isn't venomous and that your doctor gets a 5-star review on whatever the ancient Greek version of Yelp was. 7. Greek symposia, or drinking parties, were supposed to be for intellectual discussion. But they mostly devolved into a game called Kottabos, which was basically the official sport of being rich and drunk. After lounging around and drinking gallons of wine, you'd take the dregs at the bottom of your cup and, with a very theatrical flick of the wrist, fling it across the room at a target. The goal was to make a loud noise and impress everyone with your wine-flinging prowess. This was the pinnacle of entertainment. It was the ancient world's answer to the question, what if we combined beer pong with a Jackson Pollock painting? Meanwhile, some poor servant is standing in the corner, watching wine splash all over the priceless mosaics, just sighing and thinking about the 3 hours of scrubbing he'll have to do because Aristophanes got drunk and decided to show off his technique again. 8. In some Greek city-states, the requirements for citizenship were a bit more invasive than just a birth certificate. To be a full-fledged citizen with voting rights, a man had to prove he possessed a complete set of 2 testicles. This was an actual rule. You can just picture the scene at the ancient government office. A long line of guys in togas, a bored bureaucrat with a clipboard who just sighs and says, "All right, next, state your name and present the evidence." It was the world's most intrusive and awkward form of gatekeeping. You could be a decorated war hero who lost one in the Battle of Marathon. Sorry, Leonidas, we appreciate your service, but the law is the law. No duo, no voto. It gives a whole new meaning to the phrase, having the balls to participate in democracy. 9. You know that one neighbor who complains about you mowing your lawn at 9 a.m. on a Saturday? The entire ancient Greek city of Sybaris was that neighbor, but on steroids. The Sybarites were so ridiculously obsessed with luxury and avoiding any form of stress that they enacted actual laws against noise. They banned blacksmiths and carpenters from working within the city walls because the sound of hammering was just too harsh for their delicate ears. They even outlawed roosters, making it illegal to own one, so their precious beauty sleep wouldn't be disturbed by that vulgar cock-a-doodle-doo. This was a city that legally mandated a citywide chill vibe. You can just imagine the city council meetings. Motion to ban squeaky sandals? All in favor? Motion passed. It was less of a functioning society and more of a 24/7 spa resort that accidentally became a city. 10. Ever been watching a really sad movie in a theater and tried to hold back a full-on ugly cry? The ancient Greeks had a solution for that. Their massive stone theaters where they'd watch heart-wrenching tragedies were sometimes built with designated crying rooms. These were special chambers where overly emotional audience members could go to have a complete and total meltdown without disturbing everyone else. It was the original safe space, but for people absolutely losing their minds over a fictional character's downfall. It's like they knew their plays were so depressing that they had to build architectural features to handle the inevitable emotional collateral damage. It's also hilarious to imagine someone getting up mid-performance and whispering to their friend, "All right, Oedipus just realized who his mom is. I'm tapping out. See you in the sob chamber." 11. Today, if you have a problem with someone, you might subtweet them or leave a passive-aggressive comment on their Instagram. The ancient Greeks were far more direct and a lot more terrifying. They used something called curse tablets. If someone, say, stole your goat or beat you in a chariot race, you'd take a thin sheet of lead, carve a nasty curse into it calling on underworld gods to inflict horrible suffering upon them, then you'd nail it to their front door or drop it in a well. It was DIY black magic. These weren't vague curses either. They were incredibly specific, like may Chares's tongue twist in his mouth when he tries to speak in court, or may Demetrios's bowels turn to water. It was the ancient equivalent of leaving a 1-star Yelp review on someone's soul. 12. If you thought your high school gym class was tough, you've never heard of the Spartan Crypteia. This was an elite secret police/death squad made up of the toughest Spartan teenagers. As a final graduation test, these young men would be sent out into the countryside with nothing but a dagger and told to survive by any means necessary. Their primary mission? To sneak up on and assassinate the strongest and most rebellious of the helots, the state-owned slaves. This was considered a vital part of their education, state-sponsored murder as a final exam. It's like if the Boy Scouts had a merit badge for covert operations and instilling terror. It's a chilling reminder that while Athens was busy inventing philosophy, Sparta was busy perfecting the art of being the absolute scariest place on earth. 13. Modern beauty standards are weird, but they've got nothing on the ancient Greeks. In some parts of Greece, the most sought-after, drop-dead, gorgeous facial feature a woman could have was a unibrow. That's right, a single, unbroken monobrow was considered a sign of immense beauty and intelligence. Women who weren't naturally blessed with this furry forehead caterpillar would use makeup to fake it. They'd take dark powders like kohl and literally paint a bridge of hair between their eyebrows. It was the ultimate power move. You could just walk into a room, and your unibrow would announce, "I am both beautiful and smart. My brain is so big it's trying to escape through my forehead." It really makes you wonder what they'd think of modern eyebrow grooming. They'd probably be horrified. 14. Forget swiping right on Tinder or sending a dozen texts. In ancient Greece, the way you proposed marriage was by yeeting an apple at a woman. If a man threw an apple at a woman and she caught it, that was it. She had legally accepted his proposal of marriage. No discussion, no, let me think about it. Just, congratulations, you caught the apple, we're getting married on Tuesday. You have to wonder how many marriages started by accident. A woman just trying to catch a piece of fruit that was randomly flying at her head, and suddenly she's engaged to some guy she's never met. It also puts a lot of pressure on your throwing arm. A guy with a bad aim could accidentally propose to 3 different women just trying to get the apple to his intended target. It was the most chaotic and athletic form of courtship imaginable. 15. Every society needs a way to deal with its problems, but the ancient Greeks had a particularly brutal and bizarre method. When the city was suffering from a plague, famine, or just a general streak of bad luck, they would perform a ritual involving a pharmakos, which is a fancy word for a human scapegoat. They would select one of the poorest, ugliest, or most useless members of the community, feed him a final, luxurious meal, and then drive him out of the city while beating him with sticks. The idea was that this person would carry all the city's sins and impurities away with him. It was basically a spiritual deep cleaning, but instead of a vacuum, you used a dude. It's the ultimate version of, "It wasn't my fault," blaming all your problems on one unlucky guy and then literally hitting him until he leaves town. 16. Thought cancel culture was bad? The ancient Greeks invented it, and it was way more intense. It was called Ostracism. Once a year, the citizens of Athens could gather and vote to banish literally anyone they wanted from the city for 10 years. No trial, no evidence, no defense. All you needed was for 6,000 people to scratch your name onto a piece of broken pottery, called an ostracon. You could be the most popular general one day, and the next, you're packing your bags because enough people thought you were getting a little too big for your toga. It was democracy at its most savage. It was basically the world's first and most brutal popularity contest, where the loser didn't just get sent home, they got exiled from their entire world for a decade. 17. The ancient Greeks gave us philosophy and drama, but they also had a serious, deep-seated fear of a zombie apocalypse. Archaeological digs have uncovered numerous graves where the skeletons were restrained. We're talking about bodies pinned down with heavy rocks, skulls weighed down with stones, or even corpses with their hands and feet tied together. This wasn't a punishment, it was a precaution. The living were so terrified that the dead might get bored, crawl out of their graves, and come back to haunt them that they literally bolted them down. It's like they believed every single person who died had the potential to become a malevolent revenant. Imagine being the ancient Greek undertaker. Your job isn't just to bury the body, it's to make sure that sucker stays put, like you're trying to baby-proof a tomb against a supernaturally strong, very angry corpse. 18. In the modern world, having a baby is a monumental event. In ancient Greece, it was more like a product review. After a child was born, it was presented to the father, the patriarch of the family, who would then inspect it. If the baby was deemed weak, deformed, or quite often just the wrong gender, meaning a girl, he had the absolute right to order it to be abandoned. This practice, known as infant exposure, meant the baby was simply left on a hillside or a public place to die from the elements, or be eaten by wild animals. It was a brutally pragmatic approach to family planning. It's a chilling concept, like a return policy for human beings. Sorry, this one came out with a weird birthmark. Let's just leave it outside and try for a better model next time. It's one of the darkest and most shocking norms of this celebrated civilization. 19. The ancient Greeks took their laws very seriously. So seriously, in fact, that they even put inanimate objects on trial. There was a special court in Athens designed specifically for prosecuting animals and objects that had caused a person's death. The most famous example is the trial of an axe. During a ritual sacrifice, an axe used to kill an ox was declared guilty of murder. The axe was formally charged, tried in court. I assume it waived its right to an attorney. Found guilty, and as punishment, it was ceremonially thrown into the sea. This wasn't a joke. It was a legitimate legal proceeding. You have to wonder what the courtroom drama was like. Objection, Your Honor. My client is clearly a tool. It was wielded by another. It's the ultimate bureaucratic absurdity, creating an entire legal framework to hold a piece of sharpened metal accountable for its actions. 20. The Greek legal system had some other quirks, especially when it came to slaves. According to Athenian law, a slave's testimony was only considered valid in court if it was obtained under torture. Let me repeat that. They believed that a slave would only tell the truth if they were being subjected to extreme physical pain. A slave couldn't just walk into court and say, "I saw this happen." Instead, both the prosecution and the defense could demand that a slave be tortured to extract evidence. It was a required part of the process. It's a horrifyingly twisted logic that basically says, we can't trust you unless you're screaming in agony. This wasn't seen as cruel. It was just standard legal procedure, like swearing on an ancient text, but infinitely more brutal. It's a terrifying glimpse into how little a slave's humanity was valued. 21. The dehumanization of slaves didn't stop in the courtroom. The great philosopher Aristotle, one of the brightest minds in human history, famously described a slave as a tool that can speak. That was their legal and social definition. They weren't considered people. They were property with a voice box. Think about that. In the eyes of the law, a hammer, a plow, and a human slave were all in the same category. Things you own to make your life easier. It's like if your Roomba could suddenly talk back to you about its feelings, but you were still legally allowed to treat it like a vacuum cleaner. It's a deeply disturbing concept that coexisted right alongside the birth of democracy and ideas about freedom, creating one of history's most jarring contradictions. 22. Life for most women in Athens was incredibly restrictive. They were expected to stay home, manage the household, and be completely invisible in public life. But then there were the heterae. These women were in a class of their own. They were highly educated, witty, and financially independent courtesans who were the complete opposite of the typical Athenian wife. A hetera could attend the all-male symposia, drink wine, and engage in sharp intellectual debates about philosophy and politics with the most powerful men in the city. They were basically the only women in Athens who were allowed to have a personality in public. It was a bizarre social structure where the only way for a woman to be treated as an intellectual equal was to also be a high-class sex worker. It was a strange, and for them, probably lucrative loophole in an otherwise brutally patriarchal society. 23. If you went to see a play by Sophocles or Euripides in ancient Greece, you wouldn't see a single actress on stage. All the roles, including the powerful female characters like Medea or Antigone, were played by men. They would don elaborate masks, wigs, and costumes, including a charming piece of stagecraft called a prosternita, which was basically a fake wooden chess piece to create a female silhouette. So you'd be watching a heart-wrenching scene with a queen pouring her soul out on stage, and under the mask it's just some hairy dude named Dave. It was essentially the world's first and most serious drag show. It's a wild thought that the foundational masterpieces of Western theater were performed entirely by men, trying their best to hit the high notes in a dramatic monologue while wearing a wooden bra. 24. The ancient Olympic Games were the pinnacle of athletic achievement, but they had a strict no girls allowed policy. And I mean strict. It wasn't just that women couldn't compete. Married women were forbidden from even being spectators. The penalty for a woman caught sneaking a peek at the naked athletes was to be thrown off a nearby mountain. That is not an exaggeration. The punishment for watching sports was death by cliff. This rule was so absolute that there's a famous story of one mother who disguised herself as a male trainer to watch her son compete. When he won, she jumped over the barrier in celebration, her disguise fell off, and she was exposed. She was only spared because her son was a famous champion. After that, they made a new rule that even the trainers had to be naked. Problem solved, Greek style. 25. If you think modern MMA is brutal, you haven't heard of Pancration. This was the ancient Greeks' favorite combat sport, and it was basically a no-holds-barred human demolition derby. The name literally means all of the power, and they weren't kidding. The rules were incredibly simple. There were none. Okay, that's a slight exaggeration. You weren't allowed to bite or gouge out your opponent's eyes. Everything else, totally fair game. Punching, kicking, choking, joint locks, snapping fingers and toes. It was all on the table. Fights would only end when one person surrendered, was knocked unconscious, or, died. These guys were considered the ultimate athletes, the superstars of the ancient world. You'd have philosophers discussing the nature of the soul in one tent, and right next door, two giant oiled-up dudes are trying to twist each other's limbs off for a cheering crowd. It was the perfect blend of high culture and absolute savagery. 26. Philosophers are known for their big ideas, but Empedocles took it to a whole new level of insane arrogance. He was a brilliant thinker who came up with a primitive version of the theory of evolution, but he also genuinely believed he was an immortal god. To prove his divine status to his followers once and for all, he decided to perform a final, dramatic miracle. He walked to the top of Mount Etna, an active volcano, and, after presumably giving a short, self-important speech, he leaped directly into the churning lava. He thought his body would just vanish, proving he had ascended back to the heavens. Instead, the volcano did what volcanoes do and incinerated him instantly. But the story gets better. A little while later, the volcano had a small eruption and spat out a single, perfectly preserved bronze sandal. It was Empedocles's. The volcano literally rejected his footwear, giving the world the most hilarious and undeniable proof that he was, in fact, not a god. 27. We all have that one friend who's on a weird, restrictive diet, but they've got nothing on the philosopher Pythagoras. You might know him from the Pythagorean theorem in math class, but he was also the leader of a bizarre, cult-like brotherhood with some very strange rules. The weirdest one? A strict, absolute ban on eating beans. Yes, beans. He forbade his followers from even touching them. His reasoning was a cocktail of insanity. He claimed that beans contained the souls of the dead, and that eating a bean was a form of cannibalism. He also believed that the shape of a bean resembled the gates of Hades, and, on a more practical level, he argued that flatulence, the gas you get from beans, disturb the sacred harmony of the body and soul. He was so committed to this that legend says he was once chased by enemies to the edge of a bean field and chose to be captured and killed rather than defile himself by running through it. 28. The Spartans were obsessed with discipline, austerity, and making life as difficult as possible, and their currency was no exception. While other Greek cities were using elegant gold and silver coins, Sparta used giant, clumsy iron rods called obols. This wasn't because they didn't have access to precious metals, it was a deliberate choice. The rods were huge, heavy, and had almost no value, so you'd need a full ox cart to carry enough money to buy anything significant. The goal was to make wealth physically inconvenient, discouraging luxury and theft. I mean, who's going to try and rob a bank when they need a forklift to get away with the cash? It's the most aggressively inconvenient economic policy in history. You can just imagine a Spartan dad giving his kid his allowance and just dropping a 30-pound iron bar on his foot. Here you go, son. Don't spend it all in one place. 29. You probably think of computers as a modern invention, but the ancient Greeks built one over 2,000 years ago. It's called the Antikythera mechanism. Discovered in a shipwreck, this shoebox-sized device is a mind-bogglingly complex system of over 30 interlocking bronze gears. For centuries, nobody knew what it was. But modern scans revealed its true purpose. It was an analog computer. By turning a hand crank, you could perfectly predict the movement of the sun, the moon, and the 5 known planets. It could track lunar phases, predict eclipses, and even tell you the schedule for the next Olympic Games. It's so technologically advanced that nothing even close to its complexity appears again in the historical record for over 1,000 years. It's like finding a fully functional iPhone buried in a medieval castle. It's a terrifyingly brilliant piece of engineering that proves the ancient Greeks weren't just thinking about philosophy, they were building the cosmos in a box. 30. Long before we had robots that vacuum our floors, a Greek inventor named Hero of Alexandria was building actual automatons in the 1st century AD. This guy was the Tony Stark of the ancient world. He wasn't just building toys, he was creating sophisticated mechanical wonders powered by steam, water, and pneumatics. He invented the world's first steam engine, which he used to power a spinning sphere. He created automatic temple doors that would magically swing open when a fire was lit on the altar. He built a coin-operated holy water dispenser for temples, basically a vending machine for the pious. He even designed a fully automated 10-minute theatrical play performed entirely by a cast of robots, powered by a system of ropes, knots, and gears. It's absolutely insane. While everyone else was still writing on scrolls, this dude was basically living in Westworld. 31. When facing off against terrifying war elephants, the ancient world's equivalent of a battle tank, the Greeks came up with a solution that was both brilliant and utterly psychotic. They weaponized pigs. They discovered that elephants are, for some reason, terrified by the sound of a pig squealing. So, they took this knowledge and turned it up to 11. During a siege, Greek soldiers would coat live pigs in flammable oil, set them on fire, and send them screaming towards the enemy's elephant lines. The sight and sound of these shrieking, flaming pigs would cause the massive elephants to panic, turn around, and stampede right back through their own army. It's one of the most brutal, bizarre, and shockingly effective tactics in the history of warfare. It's something you'd expect to see in a Monty Python sketch, not in a serious military strategy guide. 32. In the hot, dusty climate of ancient Greece, staying clean was a big deal, but they didn't have soap. Their method was a bit more abrasive. The daily hygiene routine involved slathering your entire naked body in olive oil. Then, you'd use a curved metal tool called a strigil to scrape all the oil, dirt, sweat, and dead skin off your body. You were literally scraping the filth off yourself in thick, grimy layers. It was less like taking a shower and more like detailing a car. And this was often done in public, at the gymnasium, so you could chat with your friends while you both scraped muck off each other. The resulting sludge, as we've learned, was sometimes collected and sold. It was a full-service hygiene system that started with getting oily and ended with your personal grime becoming a commercial product. 33. The The Parthenon in Athens is hailed as the pinnacle of architectural perfection, a flawless masterpiece of straight lines and right angles. Except it's a complete illusion. The building is a giant, magnificent optical trick. The ancient Greek architects were absolute masters of mind games. They understood that a truly straight horizontal line, when viewed from a distance, would appear to sag in the middle. To counteract this, they built the entire base and roof of the Parthenon with a slight upward curve. So, the lines that look perfectly straight are actually bent. They also made the columns bulge slightly in the middle and lean inwards, so they would appear perfectly uniform and upright to the human eye. They literally built an imperfect building to make it look perfect. It is the most brilliant and arrogant act of architectural trolling in human history. They didn't just build a temple, they built a monument that actively messes with your brain to achieve an impossible ideal of perfection. Turns out, the same people who built the Parthenon also believed sneezing was divine communication and that cabbage cured hangovers. So here's the question. What normal thing we do today will make us look like total idiots in 2,000 years? Be brave, drop your wildest guess in the comments. And if you love history with a side of madness, hit like and subscribe. We've got plenty more ancient nonsense to uncover.